Welcome to the Daily Insider here on Vegas Insider. I am Kevin Rogers. Today is Friday, April 22nd, 2022. Plenty of NBA playoff talk. Last night, the Minnesota Timberwolves, what a meltdown that was. They fall to Memphis, and the Grizzlies get the road cover. Never in doubt, down 26. Minnesota had two 12-point quarters. I don't know how that's even possible in the NBA, but they did that last night. So the Grizzlies up 2-1. The Mavs without Luka, they're up 2-1 over the Jazz. And Golden State held off Denver to go up 3-0 in that series. So all the road teams won last night. Now we'll see if it continues tonight. Heat and Hawks, Game 3 in Atlanta with Miami up 2-0. Also Game 3 in Chicago, Bucks and Bulls. They're tied at 1. No Chris Middleton for Milwaukee. And then the big story in the West, top-seeded Suns. 1-1 now with New Orleans. Devin Booker's out a few weeks, so we'll see how the Suns respond to that. But with all that being said, let us bring on our old friend. We had him on during NFL every Thursday to break down all the trends, and he does it for NBA too. So we'll bring him on now. It's Vince Akins, who is joining us here on the Daily Insider. Vince, good to see you again. We haven't seen you since the Super Bowl, and you had a stat. You have a bunch of things to go over here. First one we go over with you. Road favorites in Game 3 of a playoff series, 23-5-1 ATS since the 2017 playoffs. Now, we saw two road favorites win last night and cover, Memphis and Golden State. Dallas was a dog. But this is just unbelievable where you have the road teams now. You would think the home court advantage would have mattered for these teams, but I'm not going to say it didn't because Minnesota blew a big lead. But how do you explain that the three home teams all lose last night?
Yeah, it's a pretty interesting stat. There actually, I believe that was before the Golden State game last night. Well, so that brings that to 24-5. So you think about the situation here, and that one goes back to the 2017 playoffs, eliminating the 2020 season. So the bubble season, obviously, it's not really true road games there. So I eliminated that one from the stat. 24-5-1. So you think about Game 3 being sort of a pivotal game in a series, particularly, we'll talk about a specific subset of that when we talk about a couple of these individual games when we get to them here in a minute. But the better team going on the road in Game 3, the higher seed, they show their dominance against the spread. You think about the games, and I think the most interesting thing as we get into the three games tonight is that they are such a similar slate of games in that we have three very similar lines. We have the favored road team. We get the underdog home team. Two of these games, I can't remember games that have been more similar maybe than Milwaukee, Chicago, and Phoenix, New Orleans. And that 1-1 surprising upset win in Game 2. And yet in Game 3, the favorite team is missing their second best player in both games for the first time here. So really two similar games as far as handicapping. And we're going to see that as we go through some of these trends that cover both games.
So you have now over the last two nights, well, I guess we'll go back to Game 3 with Philly and Toronto because Philly was up 2-0. They were a short favorite, and granted, they were losing that whole game. Joel Embiid is that crazy three. So Philadelphia shouldn't have covered. Memphis shouldn't have covered. Now we transition to the first game with the Heat and the Hawks. Miami, great in the first two games. We'll see if Atlanta, who made that big run last year to the Eastern Conference Finals, if they can go home and maybe get that luck, because so far it hasn't worked for these teams now.
Yeah, so we talk about the spot for the three games. This is the unique one of the three in that it is 2-0 Heat coming into this Game 3, and the Heat have looked fairly dominant in the two games so far. So I'm going to look at a couple different angles. This is a bit more of a mixed game with some angles favoring each side. Starting with, this has 2 days of rest going from Miami to Atlanta in this Game 3. So I want to look at how these teams have performed with the extra rest this season. And interestingly, Miami is one of the best teams in the league this season, playing with 2+ days of rest. They're 16-2 overall and 13-5 against the spread this season, playing with 2+ days of rest. Obviously, that was applicable for them in Game 1 of this series, where they had nearly a week of rest before playing the Hawks in that game. But this is the second best mark this season, 13-5 against the spread for any team playing with 2+ days rest. So you think about the kind of team Miami is, a bit of a veteran, older team, particularly at the top end with Jimmy Butler, you see there, and Kyle Lowry. They have benefited from having that extra rest this season. Just looking at the Hawks on the other end, the Hawks are 7-10 overall this season, 6-10-1 against the spread with 2+ days rest. So you see a bit of a difference there, and where Miami might have a little bit of an extra edge compared to the normal teams with both playing with 2 days rest here in this game. Interestingly, looking on the other side here, Atlanta, the small home dog in this game, you see getting 1.5 currently. They have won outright their last 4 games playing as a home dog. That goes back to February. And they've won them pretty convincingly, each been by 6+ points, including a couple of double-digit victories in that set. So Atlanta recently, as a home dog, obviously those were in playoff games, but has performed pretty well recently with 4 straight wins as a home dog. So I wanted to look at a couple of unique things that happened in game 2. And for Miami, it was a really unique thing with Jimmy Butler scoring 45 points. Actually, the Heat have not had a player with more than 40 points in any game so far this season until that game. And the last player to score 45 plus for Miami somehow, this is true, is LeBron. So you think about Miami, really a team effort. And you think about Jimmy Butler, Lowry now with Hero, Robinson. They tend to spread out the scoring more than some star-driven teams. So I wanted to look at in the recent playoff history how teams perform after they had a huge score in their last game. Obviously, that 45 points qualified. So look at games where a team had a score with more than 40 points in the game. And those teams in their next game were 23-32 against the spread. So 41% against the spread, coming off a game with a score with more than 40 points. So you think about that dominant individual effort. It doesn't necessarily translate as well game to game. You think about the playoffs and the adjustments some teams can make. So we've had a little trouble going forward next game. Finally, I just wanted to look at, and the against the spread number is not that interesting here, but I wanted to look at teams that have lost game 1 and 2 of the postseason series by at least 10 points in game 3. Interestingly, those teams are 32-31 in game 3. So you think about the way series change. Most of those teams are going from road to home in game 3. They're slightly above 500 against the spread as well. That hasn't really worked out so far this season with Toronto and Denver both losing game 3 as well. But you think about how series change, and sometimes we forget, teams look different on road and home in the playoff series. When teams get blown out, that's by 10+ points in each of the first 2 games of the series. They are above 500 overall in game 3 of the series.
Couple things. Number one, when you said who the last Heat player was to score 45, I was saying in my head, I'm like, is it Wade? Was it Alonzo Mourning? Oh, it was LeBron. I'm like, oh, that's right. LeBron played for the Heat. I forgot. I live in South Florida. I'm like, oh, okay. I wouldn't even thought LeBron would be the first guy. But besides that, here's a couple things. Number one, Vince, Atlanta's lost now since last year 4 straight game 2s. I found interesting in the playoffs. The game 3s, because they lost game 2 at New York in the first round, beat the Knicks at home. Granted, they were a better team than the Knicks. But Philadelphia, Milwaukee lost game 3 to Philadelphia, lost game 3 to Milwaukee at home. So I wonder if that trend, again, very small sample size, but I wonder if that will happen again. But on the flip side, too, Hawks in the 2 home games with the Heat this year, they were favored in both of them. Now they're a dog. And like you just meant, I forgot about Denver, too, throwing them in as a game 3 loser at home. That are they going to break this? Like, are we going to keep seeing these road teams win with these short favorite lines?
Yeah, historically, favorites have done well in in round 1 of the playoffs. I think that applies here too, where it wouldn't surprise me, to see maybe one of the 3 upsets tonight, but favorites overall prevailing. And 2 to 3 games, you look at, we talk about how these 3 games are very similar. So, this could easily, looking at some of the trends, be the one of them where people, I think, are counting out the Hawks a little more than those other teams. Both teams, in the other 2 games have their opponents with serious injuries coming into this game, where people are just sort of writing off the Hawks style of play based on what happened in game 1, game 2 there, and maybe not considering them as much as they should in this home game.
Now, the next game, Vince, we'll look at staying in the East. So Milwaukee was laying 10 in game 1, barely won. Chicago had the lead with 4 minutes to go, and then the Bucks went on a bit of a run, and then they ended up winning, but they didn't cover. Bulls come out. DeRozan plays much better in game 2. They shoot the ball better. Chicago wins game 2. So now the Bucks, a short favorite. They were laying 1.5, I believe, yesterday. It's up to 2.5 now at SI Sportsbook. But no Chris Middleton, and we'll see how much that affects the Bucks. Yeah, Giannis is still playing. You still have Drew Holiday. You still have a bunch of guys that can score in that team. Let's not make it out to be the Bucks are totally shot now. But do you have any faith in Chicago now after playing well enough the first 2 games to hang with Milwaukee? Now a reasonable number for the Bucks to cover. What do you have with this game now, the defending champs laying points on the road?
Sure. Before we get into some of the stats, I'll just say I think Milwaukee's going to be an interesting test case here because they don't have a ton of depth on this team to begin with. And, it might not show up tonight in a one game where they need to sort of establish dominance in this 1-1 series. But, they're not going super deep in these rotations to begin with. And you think about the minutes Chris Middleton was playing, was already up into the mid-30s before leaving the game 2. There's a lot of minutes to fill that Middleton's going to be missing in these next couple of weeks. On the other hand, I'm sure the Bucks would love to finish this series early and have some rest and get their team ready for what might be a tougher matchup next round. But, at this point, 1-1, going back to Chicago, I don't think they can overlook the Bulls. So we dig into the stats first. Obviously, this one's going to apply to both the next two games we talk about. Teams coming off a major playoff upset win. So I looked at 9+ points. Obviously, the Bulls in game 2 is a 10-point underdog, and New Orleans as well as a similar 9.5, 10-point underdog in that game 2 win. On the next game, teams are just 1-21 overall, and 8-14 against the spread. So you think about it, these teams are usually underdogs again in the next game. You see that here, but have only pulled off a victory to follow that up once in 22 attempts. This goes back in playoff history, looking back about 20 years or so in playoff games. Since 2018, these teams are 1-6 against the spread, coming off that big upset playoff victory. The lone win, actually, of that 1-21 was Memphis in 2015 over Golden State, where they took that 2-1 lead in the series. And some people thought that Memphis had some things figured out in Golden State, and then Golden State went ahead and rolled through the next 3 games on the way to the title. But so interesting nugget. I mentioned that. I'll mention that again on New Orleans as well. 1-21, because you think about where both these lines are, where they're closer to toss-up lines with the Bulls just getting 2.5 and New Orleans getting 1.5 in game 3. So I kind of want to look at each team individually and some coming off a big upset win or a big upset loss and how they've performed. The Bulls, this one goes back a few years now, are 2-8 against the spread and just 1-9 overall. Coming off a win is more than a 7-point underdog. It's the first time they've been in the situation this year, but going back to 2018, 2019, 2020, they saw that situation a few times with big upset wins. On the other side, I found this one pretty interesting because I feel like this has been happening about once a year to the Bucks without looking up the stat, and I did. It's happened 4 times in the last 3 years where the Bucks have lost a playoff game as more than a 7-point favorite. It feels like in the first bubble series against the Hawks last year, that they occasionally will take some games for granted. Coming off those games, they're 4-0 against the spread in the next game, winning all 4 of those outright as well, with their favorites still in all 4, just like they are tonight. So they they've let some playoff games slide in recent years, but they have performed strong, coming off a loss of big favorite in the playoffs the next 3 years. So finally, moving forward here, I mentioned that subset of, we talked about road favorites in game 3 of a playoff series, 24-5-1 now, going back to 2017 playoffs. So I want to look at just series that were 1-1 or 0-2. There's only a couple that were 0-2, and a team still a road favorite in game 3. Over that time, teams are 11-0-1 against the spread when the series is 1-1 or 0-2, and they are a road favorite in game 3 of the series. So we talked about that trend there initially. These teams are 1-1, 0-2. This is really becomes a pivotal game, a deciding game for them, where they're the road favorites, and they have shown dominance. Obviously, winning all 12 of those and covering 11 and pushing 1. That did cover with Memphis last night. It was active. Memphis 1-1 in that series. Obviously, we talked a little bit about how that was a unique game, but Memphis came back to win and cover that game. So a couple extra nuggets here. The Bulls have not performed well as a home dog of late. I mentioned with the Hawks playing well as a home dog. The Bulls, on the other hand, have lost 7 straight games as a home dog going back to February, and have failed to cover 5 straight as a home dog. And actually, the last 3 of those games, all in April, they lost by 18+ points each. So you thought about where the Bulls were struggling a little bit down the stretch, getting some points at home. They did not perform well in those games. Just a couple of quick final nuggets here. That trend about the Heat and Jimmy Butler is also active in this game, with DeMar DeRozan having scored 41 points in game 2. So that teams are 23-32 against the spread, having a score with more than 40 points last game. And then one final nugget, just to throw some cold water on the Bucks, since I know I brought off a lot of pro Bucks trends here. This goes back to 2008. Teams that allowed at least 25 more points last playoff game than they did 2 playoff games ago. So in this case, the Bucks allowed 114 points in game 2 after allowing just 86 points in game 1. So 25 or more point difference between the two games. In the next game, they're just 35 and 65 against the spread. So it's a pretty good sample size there of 100 games, covering just 35% of the time. So a lot of information backing the Bucks there, but just one, to throw a little cold water on that and consider the Bulls in this game. As teams that had a tough defensive performance compared to 2 games ago do tend to struggle in the next game of that series as well.
The ones that really stick out to me, Vince, are teams coming off a playoff upset. The first one, upset win as at least a 9-point dog, 1-21 straight up. And I'm glad I was going to ask you which game that was, and you said Memphis over Golden State back a few years ago. But that's incredible considering it's such a small number tonight that, you're not saying, well, Milwaukee's got to cover 6 or 7 points. So they're only got to cover, basically a basket, 2 baskets tonight. In a sense, but also this one sticks out too. The Bulls are 0-7 in their last 7 as a home dog since February. That goes back to a lot of people were criticizing Chicago, saying you're losing to these top 5, 6 teams in the league. You can beat the bad teams, the mediocre teams, but you can't beat the good teams. I just wonder now, again, getting 10 points in each of the first 2 games, now getting 2.5 at home, no Middleton. Those numbers are damning. It's the ones that you said about the 0-7. You're getting blown out in some of those games by Boston, they lost by 6 to Memphis, but who was it? The Heat took care of them, the Bucks, the Celtics. Those are teams in your conference that really, knocked you around at home.
Yeah, I mean, I think the stat has been cited several times this season that the Bulls really struggle against top 4, top 5 teams in conferences, and that makes sense that they were home dogs in a lot of those games, just as they are tonight. Obviously they got rid of the hump once in game 2, but we'll see if they can do that again here.
Now let's look at the West and going way west to New Orleans. Obviously, this is just injury riddled. This situation with Phoenix. So Devin Booker gets hurt in game 2. He was playing very well. He gets hurt on that chase down on that transition play. Hamstring injuries out 2 to 3 weeks. So Phoenix now goes to New Orleans. New series tied at 1. I still think the Suns get through this series in spite of this injury to Booker. But now you're laying 1.5. We'll see where the money goes throughout the day. CJ McCollum was a great pickup for the Pelicans, helped lead them through the play-in tournament and through the first 2 games. You know how good Brandon Ingram is. Zion's still not playing. He would be helpful if he played. But what do you have here with the Suns? Again, like we talked about, these teams, and you just had that stat about the up or either 1-1 or 0-2, your favorite in game 3. They do very well. Memphis, we saw that last night. What do you have here with Phoenix to back them, or are the Pelicans worth a look tonight?
Yeah, so just talking about that injury for a minute. I do think with the Suns, it's sort of important to note that obviously their backup guards are not Devin Booker. There are at least clear minutes to be had for Campaign and Landry Shamet in this game. That they are at least reasonable and somewhat playoff proven players compared to some of the guys that the Bucks may be filling in with, not just tonight, but as these series and playoffs go on for the 2 teams. So I mentioned how similar these matchups are: the Milwaukee, Chicago, and Phoenix, New Orleans, and as it happens, a lot of these playoff specific systems and trends are going to be the same for the 2 games. And that starts with the one you mentioned. The 2017 road favorites in game 3 that are either 1-1 or 0-2 in the series are 11-0-1, going back to the 2017 playoffs. That's active in this game as well, with the Suns giving that small number here, 1-1 in this series after the game 2 loss. Similarly, New Orleans was a 9.5-point underdog in game 2, winning outright. So a similar situation where those teams are 1-21 overall the next game. And obviously with this line, that straight up number might be pretty relevant with the Suns just laying 1.5 points. A couple other nuggets specific to that. So unlike Milwaukee, Chicago, where Chicago just held on to a 4-point victory, New Orleans won 125-114 in game 2. So a little bit more of a dominant victory as a big underdog. So I looked at playoff games where teams were coming off a double-digit win as at least a 4-point underdog. So medium or greater underdog, and a little bit bigger victory, not just snuck by the game. So since 2017-18, teams coming off that kind of game are just 8-20 against the spread in the next playoff game of that series. This one was actually active in game 2 of the Minnesota Memphis series. Well, that was the first time this season where Minnesota won big as an underdog in that game one. Memphis came back and reestablished themselves in game two. So we looked at the Suns specifically here. Just the past two seasons, the Suns are coming off a loss as elite. There's more than a 7-point favorite 12 times. These are mainly regular season games. But, as the Suns, and particularly this season with some big numbers, they've let a few games slip away where they were heavy favorites. Coming off those games, past two seasons, the Suns are 12-0 overall in the next game, 9-3 against the spread in those games as well. So obviously a team like the Suns is favored in most of these next games as well, was solid against the spread performance and they've not lost coming off a loss is more than 7-point favorite the next game. Two final notes here. The Pelicans, we've looked at how these teams have been as home dogs recently. The Pelicans going back to January, just 2-8 against the spread in their last 10 games as a home dog. So as well as the Pelicans have played the second half of the season, games where they've been home dogs has not necessarily been their best situation. I believe they did win outright the 2 games that they covered there, but the other 8 of the 10 they failed to cover as home dogs. The last 3 games in April here as a home dog, they've all been losses by more than 15 points. So pretty similar to the Bulls there in the way that they've performed. And then finally, I'll just note, because I threw some cold water on the Bucks, I'll do the same thing for Phoenix here. That system that I talked about, playoff teams that allowed at least 25 more points last game than they did 2 games ago, being just 35% against the spread, that is also active here in this game, with Phoenix allowing 125 points in game 2 after allowing just 99 points to the Pelicans in game 1 of the series.
Now, I know I have a huge sample size here for you, Vince. 2 games. Very huge. But the play-in tournament began, I'm not counting Memphis-Portland, what that was in the bubble. In the bubble, I think a lot of stuff was throw out. Like the bubble, like we can't put that in a lot of these. But last year was the first year of the play-in tournament. All right, this kind of just came to me. Memphis and Washington were the 2 teams that had to win the 2 games to get in. It wasn't the 7-8. It was the teams that had to win twice to get into the tournament or into the playoffs. Now, both of them, I just looked these up, Vince, because this applies to the Hawks and to the Pelicans, the 2 teams that won the 2 games to get in. I want to see what they did in that first home game back in this series. Memphis played Utah, lost by 10. Washington got blown out by Philadelphia at home. So that's where I'm wondering with Atlanta and New Orleans tonight. I kind of like Atlanta, and they're both short dogs. They were a little bigger dogs, these teams last year. I just wonder that too, that you played in the play-in tournament, you survived. Now you're playing a pretty good team. I mean, they're both playing 1 seeds, the Pelicans and the Hawks. That now coming back home, is it a letdown? That's what I wonder after all of this. Again, 2 games, they both lost as a home dog last year. I just wonder if that repeats itself again.
Yeah, that's just considered too something just where Memphis in particular did have a strong performance early in that series,
right?
And then sort of faded as the series went on. Washington, a little bit of the same. Washington was not in that series a whole lot.
Well, they were outclassed by Philadelphia.
Yeah. But it is interesting to kind of look at. We consider those play-in teams, particularly the ones that played 2 tough games. If they do sort of fade as these first-round series go on, and just having the extra miles of tough in those elimination, in particular play-in games, when we get to game after game of this grind, if they tend to fade and the higher seeds tend to be a little fresher, something to consider.
Yeah, and again, it happened last year. It was 1 year. It's only the second year of the play-in tournament. So this isn't like, the last 10 years this has happened and, it's something to look at. But just something to consider. I still like Atlanta. I'm not getting off Atlanta on that one. Phoenix, New Orleans is just incredibly tough, I think, because it feels like the Suns would be the look here, that they would rebound because they did play a lot without Devin Booker this year. They still have Chris Paul. They still have Ayton. There's still players there. But New Orleans, it's like nothing to lose with them. I mean, they have been on a high by beating San Antonio, by beating the Clippers. I know Paul George was out, and then splitting the first 2 with Phoenix. That, hey, they're in this thing trying to upset the team that had the best regular season of anybody. So that one I'm staying away from. But anyway, a lot. Go ahead, Vince.
Oh, sorry. I think it's gonna be an interesting game. One of the things that really stood out to me in the first 2 games of that series was the energy that New Orleans played with on the road, and I could see this game going a couple different ways. In which if they do get down and some of that energy runs out, I can see that being trouble for the Pelicans. On the other hand, coming back in front of the home crowd, and obviously New Orleans is not necessarily known as the best home crowd in the NBA. But I would expect things to be pretty exciting there tonight. If they are able to build out early, there might be something to the energy they've played with some of their younger players. Jackson Hayes has had a big series so far, etc.
Yeah, look, I mean, they're a team that started 1-12. They were out of it, and their top player, you would think, are the face of the franchise, isn't suited up for one game this year, but they're still in it. They still got a shot here, and one of the top players in the league is going to be out the rest of the series. So it's there for New Orleans for the taking. If they lose, they lose, but at least they're not totally out of it, and they have some small shot. But anyway, Vince Akins, anything for this weekend you're looking at yet, or you're in the lab for these games this weekend, or nothing yet?
Yeah, still I've gotten into Saturday's games a little bit, but it's game to game at this point, unlike the NFL a little bit. But I'll just say in general, I can't stress enough the importance of looking at playoff specific data in the NBA. There's a large sample size of it, and the playoffs, they're a different game. Not that regular season and total season data is meaningless, but when you have some historical data, you can look back the last 7 years of playoff performances, not just team wise, but these spots, just like we talk about game 3, what different teams, different seeds, different road favorites do, things like that. I've had a ton of success in NBA playoff handicapping. I think it's one of the best sports to attack. There's a lot of data. And even though lines are pretty static and pretty well established, that doesn't mean there isn't value spots in them.
Vince Akins, you can find him on Twitter at SB Breakers. Great job with the NFL. Great job with the NBA. Also Major League Baseball. As far as the trends go, you could find diamond trends and hoop trends on Vegas Insider. And Vince does a great job with it, and he's right. I mean, the playoffs is so specific that you could find opportunities. We'll see if it's as easy as last night. Just take Memphis and take Golden State, and it's that easy. But we'll see if that happens again coming up tonight. Vince, we appreciate the time, and we'll catch up with you again during the playoffs.
Absolutely. Look forward to talking to you. Everyone have a good playoff weekend.
All right. There is Vince Akins. And, a couple things from that. Number one, the Bulls had some lousy numbers as a home dog down the stretch. You wonder how that's going to come back tonight against Milwaukee and the Pelicans too. But again, the Bulls were a better team than the Pelicans during the regular season. The Pelicans were a 34-win team or whatever it was. They wouldn't have been in the playoffs if the Lakers didn't totally collapse. The Lakers should have been in, but we all know what happened with them. But is it as easy? Look, the Memphis thing last night, no business winning that game, even though I felt like early on, Memphis being down 20-something points, I'm like, wait a minute. They're not totally out of this just because Memphis is a 2 seed, Minnesota's a 7. They're not out of this. If it was New Orleans down 20-something to Phoenix, you say, oh, my God, I can't believe they did this. I mean, it's a big comeback for Memphis, but at the same time, you kind of knew just get it within 10. You're not going to go on a crazy run, which they did later in the game with 26-2 run or whatever it was to get back in and then take the lead. But is it as easy as Memphis and Golden State tonight? The Heat, Phoenix, Milwaukee, Philly tomorrow. And then you have the situation of some of the other games. The Mavericks are up 2-1 without Luka. When does Luka come back? If I'm Jason Kidd, I'm saying you're not playing until we lose a game, then I'll consider it. Dallas up 2-1. Take game 4. Wait a few more days with Luka. If you go 2-2 back to Dallas, you got 2 of the next 3 at home. Hope he comes back for game 5. But right now, would not play that guy game 4. No. Give him a few more days if he's not ready. You have Boston, Brooklyn tomorrow. And we'll see what the Nets do now back at home. This is a very interesting test for the Brooklyn Nets. If they can come back, I don't think the Nets are out of it yet. That's the one team we're like, just hang on. Let's see what they do. You lose game 1 at the buzzer on the Tatum layup. You lose game 2, terrible fourth quarter. I mean, obviously, Brooklyn played a good fourth quarter in game 1. Just game 2, it was terrible. That if the Nets, I mean, could they be up 2-0? Yes, they're down 2-0, and they need to obviously try to fight back into the series. They have 2 at home. Boston's a tough atmosphere center. Go back to Barclays Center. I'm not counting the Nets out yet, but man, I mean, a team that's just kicking themselves for blowing these leads. You got Philly, Toronto. Right now, zero faith in the Raptors. You had the shot to get in. I know they're beat up. But you had the shot to get in game 3. Miss a lot of free throws and beat us that crazy 3. forget it. Stick a fork in the Raptors. This is interesting here. Now, coming down the stretch of these first-round games, you're going to get excellent second-round games coming up. And a team that we really haven't mentioned, the Golden State Warriors and what they've done. So Nikola Jokic could get swept in his last two playoff series. Last year against Phoenix in the second round and against Golden State here. Jokic can only do so much. You don't have the help around you. I mean, Golden State has an elite backcourt. You still have Draymond Green. Jordan Poole has stepped up in this series. He's a very good player. It's Golden State's path right now if Devin Booker's out for a while. And the Warriors would get potentially Memphis in the next round. You think they would knock out Memphis? And Memphis, remember, eliminated Golden State last year in the play-in tournament. Also no Klay Thompson there for the Warriors too. That Steph had to do everything alone. Sports Illustrated Sportsbook, get up to $300 in free bets. New users only. Deposit with the promo code AFF300. It is legal in the state of Colorado. Again, terms and conditions apply. Must be 21 years or older to bet. That is the SI Sportsbook. You could find them online at sisportsbook.com. Sports Illustrated Sportsbook. Sign up today. All right, let's look at some baseball now heading into the weekend, and we'll roll through these games. Let's start the afternoon affair at Wrigley Field. And the Pirates, they're 6-7. That's not a bad start for them. Even the Cubs at 6-7. There's low expectations on them. But Pirates bounced back after they were swept by the Brewers in Milwaukee. And Chicago, again, they've been all right this year, considering, they ripped their team out last year. They've now lost 3 straight. They beat Tampa Bay in that opener a few nights ago. Not great weather in Chicago. Rays won the final 2, and now the Cubs, a heavy home favorite, ended up losing last night to the Pirates. So they meet again, and the last time they hooked up was earlier this month at PNC Park. Drew Smyly outdueled Jose Quintana, the former Cub. He's now with the Pirates. 2-1. Chicago won that game, laying 115. Now they're laying nearly $1.90. There's a heavy swing there for the Cubs. I do not like this game, but Pittsburgh came back last night and ended up winning it. National League Central, we remain there. Cardinals and the Reds now to the night action. That game's at 2:20. Pirates and Cubs. This at 6:40 in Cincinnati. And the Reds offensively challenged, 2-11 on the season. They split the first 4 games with Atlanta, and now they have totally fallen apart. 9 consecutive defeats for the Reds. And granted, they played Cleveland, they played the Dodgers, San Diego, so they're playing a good competition. But here's what they've scored the last few games. 0-2, 1-1, 2-1, 3-3. That's no bueno. And Jonathan India, last year's Rookie of the Year, he's hurt. Mike Moustakas is hurt. Already the lineup, they lost Eugenio Suarez. They lost Jesse Winker to Seattle. So past Joey Votto, there's not a lot to get excited about in that Cincinnati lineup. The Cardinals, they have played better of late, 7-4. Did get shut out by the Marlins last night. That was a tough spot for St. Louis because they won the first 2 at Miami, allowed 1 run to the Marlins. Pablo Lopez leads Major League Baseball in ERA right now. It's under 1. I think it's a 0.65 or something like that. He went 7 innings. Jordan Hicks, who was a reliever for the Cardinals, he started. He went 3 innings. That was the expectation. It was a 2-0 game for a bit. The Marlins opened it up and ended up winning 5-0. The Cardinals only 2 runs the last 2 games. They have a pretty solid lineup. And Albert Pujols struck out 3 times last night. So now St. Louis has a Cincinnati as a favorite. And this evening, Steven Matz and Hunter Green on the mound. Steven Matz, the former Met, his ERA is at 7.27. Hunter Green, who throws gas for the Reds, 4.35 ERA. I just don't know how much trust there is in the Reds. They played 11 of 13 games on the road, so I'll give them that. They haven't really played at home so far this season. Giants and the Nationals in D.C. Sam Long getting the start for the Giants. Patrick Corbin for the Nationals. So a pair of lefties on the hill this evening. Washington, a bit of a disappointment there. Last 2 games, losing to the Diamondbacks at home after they won the first 2 of that series. Giants continuing this long road trip at Cleveland, at the Mets. They go to Milwaukee after this. I believe they go to Milwaukee after this. But the Giants, though, they had a maybe not. Let's see. But regardless. All right, so the Giants lost 3 of 4 to the Mets. They won a few nights ago with Carlos Rodon on the mound, but in the losses, 5-4, 3-1, lost 6-2 yesterday to the Mets. After getting that 3-game sweep of Cleveland, the Giants take a small step backwards. They're still pretty good. But Washington, though, they another team with low expectations, 6-9 for the Nationals so far. Patrick Corbin, who is coming off a loss his last time out. Actually, no decision, excuse me. He didn't pitch that poorly. The Nationals led 3-0 at Pittsburgh, and then the Pirates came back and won 5-3. But the Nationals are 0-3 in Corbin's 3 starts this year. And he is a home dog for the second time. I mean, the numbers aren't great. Corbin was good a few years ago. He really wasn't good. You know what? The year the Nationals won the World Series in 19, he was 14-7. Since then, 2-7, 4.66 ERA, 9-16, 5.82 ERA, 0-2, 7.50 ERA. So Corbin just has taken a major step backwards. He was a big prize for the Nationals a few years ago. Now, granted, Max Scherzer's gone. Steven Strasburg is hurt, so the Nationals don't really have a lot of pitching. But Corbin was supposed to be the 3. He's like the 1 now because they don't have any other options. I mean, when you look at it, the Nationals have basically, who are they going with? Eric Fede, this other guy, Josiah Gray, they picked up from the Dodgers in the Scherzer deal. He won his last time out against the Diamondbacks. Josiah Gray has pitched well, but there's not a lot to get excited about in D.C. right now. The Brewers and the Phillies, a couple of notes here on this game. So Milwaukee is a road or just an underdog for the first time this season. They've been a favorite the first 13 games. They've lost 2 road series openers to the Cubs and Orioles, but both as a substantial favorite. So now they're a dog tonight. And Freddie Peralta, he got knocked around a bit by the Phillies last year, but he was a favorite in both those starts. Now he's a dog. Milwaukee has won 4 straight, coming off a 3-game sweep of Pittsburgh. They also beat St. Louis in that span. Philadelphia, you know, the Phillies, they bolstered up their lineup. They got Kyle Schwarber, who's hit a little better of late. He had a terrible start, but had a couple of home runs in that Rocky series. Nick Castellanos, they picked him up too. And yet the Phillies have just had these struggles. They've lost 7 of 9. And in the 2 games they've won, they've scored 10 and 9 runs. But every other game, they're not winning pitchers' duels. They just can't do it. Ranger Suarez actually pitched really well against the Marlins in his last start. He gets the ball tonight for the Phillies. Look, I'm going to say it's early for Philadelphia, but Milwaukee had some struggles out of the gate, minor struggles. They're still 8-5, but the Phillies at 5-8 is interesting. Marlins and the Braves in Atlanta tonight, and the Braves back at home after an up and down road trip. They had to play the Padres and the Dodgers. That wasn't easy. But they dropped 2 of 3 to the Dodgers. They split 4 with San Diego. They only got 1 run in Wednesday's loss to LA. Max Fried pitched well the night before, but Charlie Morton, that's a couple losses for him his last 2 starts. But the Braves, they actually turned to Kyle Wright this evening. Trevor Rogers, no relation. He goes for the Marlins. And he's looking for his first win. He's 0-2 so far on the season. ERA of 12.15. He got rocked by the Phillies his last time out, 7 earned runs. But he's a guy, Trevor Rogers, who was was an all-star. Last year, though, Marlins 0-3 in his 3 starts against the Braves. So he was not great in those games. And we'll see if he gets back on track tonight as a nice dog against the Braves, who, look, losing Freddie Freeman, no Acuna, it's just been up and down. It's not great. Here's the thing with Atlanta, all right? They had the least amount of wins of any division winners last year in Major League Baseball. So Atlanta was not the dominant team in the National League, but they knocked off the Brewers. They eliminated the Dodgers, and they stunned the Astros in the World Series. It was a great story, but they weren't an elite team last year. Maybe we're seeing what they are this year. They're an 85-90 win team. I don't think that's crazy. It's not an insult, but that's what they were last year. But they went on this huge run to the World Series. Now, the team they knocked out was the Dodgers, who now make the short trip to San Diego tonight to face the Padres. So LA out of the gate 9-3. They're playing well. Padres 9-5. And San Diego, after the 4-game split with Atlanta, they crushed Cincinnati the last 3 games, held the Reds to 3 runs. San Diego, what's interesting about them is, and they remain at home here. Very little travel for the Padres so far. They played at Arizona, at San Francisco, and they've had the last 7 at home. So this long homestand, but they'll be on the road for a while, the Padres, after this. So the Dodgers, they've won 8 of 9. The only loss came, like I just mentioned, Max Fried shut down the Dodgers a few nights ago. Walker Buehler was knocked around a little bit early, but LA is still elite. We know that. And they are a huge favorite tonight on the road. Julio Urias, he won, 20 games last year? He was 20-3. First start, not so good against the Rockies. $2 favorite, allowed 6 runs in a 9-4 loss to Colorado. Last time out against the Reds, ran not a great lineup, but still 5-2 win, 5 scoreless innings, 1 hit. So now he faces the Padres here this evening in San Diego. And for Urias, his numbers last season against the Padres were pretty good. He had 1 bad start out of the gate, 6 runs in June, 6-2 loss. But the last 2, 5 scoreless innings, 1 hit, 5-2 road win, 7 scoreless innings, 7 strikeouts, 3-0 home win. So Urias, after the bad first start against San Diego, he ended up pitching well the next 2. So you're not going to get the Padres this heavy of a favorite, or this heavy of an underdog, that often. Mets and the Diamondbacks in Arizona, and this one's really interesting because David Peterson really struggled against Arizona. Granted, it was like 2 bad innings last year, but he pitched 4 1/3 scoreless innings against the Diamondbacks earlier this month, helped beat Arizona at home. So now he gets the ball again. Mets are 10-4. Diamondbacks 5-8, not terrible for them because there's no expectations on them. Zach Gallen starts for Arizona, and he started the lone win Arizona had in New York last weekend. And now Gallen's a short dog here. Diamondbacks back at home after winning a pair of games at Washington. The Mets will be a public play. I still like New York here because I don't trust the Diamondbacks this short of a price. Yankees, let's go to the American League. The Yankees and the Guardians in New York. And the Yankees at 7-6. Heavy favorites tonight against Cleveland. And the Guardians have actually been pretty good of late. Why? Because they swept the White Sox. Well, okay, let's say of late, the last few days. They got swept by San Francisco and then swept the White Sox. So figure that one out. And before that, they won 4 straight after scoring 2 runs the first 2 games. So Cleveland, one of the biggest mysteries in the league so far. But at least the pitching's got back on track. 5 runs they allowed against the White Sox. And Eli Morgan, who is getting the start for Cleveland tonight, he actually beat Garrett Cole last year at Yankee Stadium 11-1. Well, he started opposite Garrett Cole. He didn't beat them like that, but he went 6 innings in that game, and Morgan was a 280 underdog and was able to beat the Yankees last year. So he's a heavy dog again this year, in this game. Jameson Taillon goes for the Yankees this evening, and he has not picked up a win yet, but in his last start, though, he picked up a no decision as the Yankees beat the Orioles 5-2. Now, the next game we'll look at, American League East rivalry. These 2 teams went to the playoffs last year, faced each other in the playoffs, and the Red Sox knocked out the Rays. Tampa Bay, a heavy favorite here against Boston. Alex Cora will not manage. He's in the COVID protocol for the Red Sox. But obviously, big game for the Rays. Rays are 7-6, Red Sox 6-7. Boston just lost the last 2 to Toronto. So the Red Sox offense has been shut down a bit. They scored 8 on Sunday against Minnesota, last 4 games, 3-2, 1-2. That's not good for that Red Sox lineup. And also, you look at their starting pitchers, no one has gone past the 5th inning the last 5 games. And Michael Wacha goes tonight for the Red Sox against his former team. Well, short tenure at Tampa Bay, but he gets to start against the Rays. And Tampa Bay, they will send out Corey Kluber, former Cy Young winner. And Kluber, he faced the White Sox in his last start, 5 innings, 2 earned runs, a 3-2 defeat to the White Sox. Kluber so far in 2 starts been a nice pickup by Tampa Bay. 2 earned runs in 9 2/3 innings, 9 strikeouts, didn't walk anybody's last start. So Kluber, not bad, but Tampa Bay off back-to-back wins over the Cubs. Red Sox off back-to-back losses. White Sox and the Twins in Minnesota this evening, and Chicago at 6-6. They look good out of the gate, but offense non-existent against the Guardians the last few days. So now Chicago heads to Minnesota tonight. The Twins avoided a sweep by beating Kansas City yesterday 1-0. Twins offense has scored 4 runs the last 3 games. And when you talk about feast or famine for the Twins, yeah, they got a 1-0 win, but in their previous 2 victories, they had 8 runs. But Minnesota's off. They had Carlos Correa. He hasn't been great so far for Houston. But the Twins just – the problem with the Twins is I feel like they can't get any momentum going. That awful win for Minnesota so far this season, they've only won back-to-back games 1 time, and that was against Seattle in the opening series. So that's a little scary there. You got to expect the White Sox would be motivated tonight. And Michael Kopech for from the White Sox, he goes tonight. Bailey Ober for Minnesota, and Bailey Ober, 6'9". That's right. He's so far 1-1 in his 2 starts for the Twins. 2 unearned runs he allowed his last time out against Boston. Justin Verlander goes tonight for Houston as they take on Toronto, and the Blue Jays off back-to-back wins for the first time since the first 2 games of the season, and they shut down the Red Sox the last few days. Verlander was great his last time out against Seattle, and he's a heavy favorite tonight. Astros just coming off that 6-0 loss to the Angels. Shohei Ohtani shut them down. Verlander, though, 13 innings, 1 run, 15 strikeouts, 3 walks in his first 2 starts of the season, 8 scoreless in a 4-0 victory over Seattle in his last start. So he gets the ball for the Astros, and Toronto will see if they can continue their winning ways, but they have not been good as far as trying to get any kind of sustained winning streak. Their longest winning streak this year is 2. So we'll see if they can make it 3 tonight. The Orioles and the Angels and Baltimore 4-9. Baltimore really scored some runs yesterday, which was good against Oakland, but they still lost 6-4. Before that, they'd scored 1 run in each of their past 3 games. I don't even know how that's possible, but Baltimore's offense is by far the worst in baseball. And they face the Angels tonight. LA's played well. I'll give Joe Maddon's team that. Since they struggled the first series against the Astros, they are 7-2 the last 9. So that's pretty strong. And as I mentioned, Shohei Ohtani pitched the last game. Reed Detmers goes tonight for the Halos, and he struggled his last time out, 5 earned runs in less than 4 innings. But the Angels beat the Rangers 9-6. 2 clear-cut overs so far as well for Detmers. And Baltimore, you know what? Yesterday they allowed 6 runs, the Orioles, but the pitching has not been terrible. They've just played a lot of low-scoring games because their offense has stunk. But Bruce Zimmerman, though, 2 starts for him, has not allowed a run. And the Orioles beat the Brewers and Yankees in those 2 games, plus 135, plus 170. Not bad. And so you want to take a shot with the Orioles again tonight if they can pull off the upset there of the Angels. Staying out west, Rangers and the A's. Texas favored here at Oakland. Texas at 3-9, Oakland 8-6. Now, it's the battle of this got to be the first time in Major League history that you have 2 starting pitchers with their last name starts with O. opposing each other? I wonder. It feels like it is, with Glen Otto for Texas and Adam Oller for Oakland. Now, Glen Otto is making his season debut. He last year 0-3, 9.26 ERA, not so great. And for the most part, whenever Glen Otto took the mound, the Rangers lost. They went 1-5 in his 6 appearances, and now he's favored. So I'm not understanding that. But, however, on the flip side, though, when you look at what Adam Oller has done, no bueno on him. He's allowed so far 8 runs in 2 starts, gave up 3 runs in 3 1/3 against the Blue Jays. He faced the Blue Jays and the Rays in his first 2 starts. So those are 2 quality teams. Now he gets Texas, which is not exactly a great offense. But I give Texas this, though. They overcame a 5-0 deficit last night and beat Seattle. So that's just their 3rd win of the season. We'll see how the Mariners bounce back tonight. Royals heading up to Seattle. Brad Keller and Chris Flexen on the mound. Royals at 5-6. Mariners at 7-6. And Keller has actually been very solid. 13 innings pitched, 2 earned runs, 5 hits. Here's the problem. The Royals have scored 1 run in each of his 2 starts, both unders. So that is definitely an issue there for the Royals. And their offense, too. Their offense has stunk, the Royals. When you look back at what they've done, they've scored 4 or less in 6 straight games. So Kansas City's got to get their offense going. They've gone under in 6 straight games. Seattle mentioned that blowing that lead to Texas last night, snapped a 3-game winning streak. And Chris Flexen, who was excellent for the Mariners last year at 14 wins so far. Mariners are 0-2 in his 2 starts. First time he's a favorite, though. He was a dog in those 2 games, under in both those games. Gave up 3 runs in each of those games. So we'll see if and also Seattle shut out both those games. So Mariners have scored 0 runs for Chris Flexen. Royals have scored 1 run for Brad Keller in each of his first 2 starts. Means you're getting either a 2-0 game or a 10-8 game. That's what you're getting tonight in Seattle, most likely. Finally, last game we'll look at before we wrap this thing up. 2 old interleague rivals going at it in Detroit, the Rockies and the Tigers. Now, Miguel Cabrera is still stuck on 2,999 hits after the controversy yesterday. Aaron Boone intentionally walked him, so the Tiger fans couldn't see it. The only thing is, though, he didn't get against the Yankees, but at least the Tigers are still at home. It's one thing if the Tigers are going on a road trip and you say, oh, well, all the fans missed it, but they get Colorado this weekend, so it's really not that big of a deal. Antonio Senzatella starts for Colorado this evening. The Rockies are 2-0 in his 2 starts, both coming at home, and he was 4-10 last year. So far, he's allowed 1 earned run each of his first 2 starts, so that's a positive sign for the Rockies. And they've hit the ball well. Chris Bryant, great pickup so far. He's hitting the ball well for the Rockies. Tarek Skubal, who was a strikeout machine for the Tigers last year, up and down pitcher, but what they'll give him, he was knocked around his first start against the White Sox in a 10-1 loss, allowed 5 runs in 4 innings. Last start against Kansas City, 5 2/3, 1 unearned run, 7 strikeouts, no walks, 2-1 win. So Skubal's pitched better, but feels like a heavy number there for Detroit. That's a stay away from game in Major League Baseball tonight. So that's what you got in Major League Baseball. NHL, there's 4 games. I mean, Colorado-Edmonton is a good game, but Colorado's still going for the President's Cup. Panthers won again last night. They wrapped up the 1 seed in the East. So Colorado's motivation is to get that President's Cup. Edmonton, they'll be in the playoffs. They just they're right on the doorstep. They played well. Ottawa, Columbus, 2 teams that are out of it. Seattle off that win over Colorado. They go to Minnesota. Wild beat the Canucks last night. Washington, a heavy favorite at Arizona. It's not really a surprise there. So that's the 4 games in the NHL coming up this evening. So that is our look at everything. And my thanks again to Vince Akins for joining us today to go over some NBA trends for tonight in the NBA for the 3 games. You can find for tomorrow's big boxing match, Dillian White and Tyson Fury out at Wembley Stadium in London. you could find our breakdown video. Sergio Mora, former world champion boxer, he joined me earlier in the week. You can find that on our YouTube channel as far as him breaking down the fight between White and Fury. A lot of great insight from Sergio, so you can find that on our YouTube channel at Vegas Insider. Also, we have NBA picks for tonight as well, some best bets. I'll break those down on our YouTube channel as well. You can find those there. And we'll be back with you coming up on Monday to look at the weekend and also next week, NFL draft. So at least we'll have a lot of NFL to talk about next week and see how this whole thing shakes out coming up next Thursday in Las Vegas. Again, I am Kevin Rogers. Thanks a lot for watching. And as always, best of luck with your bets.